Every man has a line, an invisible boundary that defines who he is at the core, a point that separates compromise from conviction, fleeting desires from deep-rooted principles. This line is not drawn randomly. It is etched through years of experience, through victories and failures, through the quiet moments of reflection when no one is watching. Crossing this line is not merely a physical act or a casual decision. It is a revelation of the inner landscape of a man's soul. It is a mirror reflecting his character, his integrity, and the values he holds most sacred. Often we underestimate the significance of these boundaries because they are invisible, subtle, and personal, yet they dictate the trajectory of a man's life far more than we realize. To understand a man fully, one does not need to measure his wealth, his popularity, or his accolades, but rather to observe the line he will not cross, the principles he refuses to compromise, and the points at which he draws the line firmly in the sand. Integrity is not something that is announced with grand speeches or loud declarations. It is a quiet, consistent force that manifests in choices, in small actions, in the way he treats those who cannot repay him, in the promises he keeps even when no one is watching, and in the courage to say no when the world pressures him to say yes. Crossing the line of integrity is not a trivial event. It is a signal to the world that the man has made a choice that aligns with his higher values, that he has defined what matters more than convenience, comfort, or popularity. It is in this crossing that one can truly perceive the essence of a person, because it strips away pretenses, reveals priorities, and uncovers the strength of conviction. Many people live their lives skimming the surface, compromising in small ways, bending rules and making exceptions, often justifying them with convenience or circumstance. But when a man reaches the point where the line cannot be ignored or bent, and he crosses it intentionally, it exposes a level of integrity that is often unseen but immensely powerful. It is a declaration that some things are non-negotiable, and these non-negotiables are the pillars of his life. When a man's actions align with his principles at this critical juncture, there is a resonance that cannot be fabricated. There is an authenticity that commands respect, not because it seeks it, but because it naturally emanates from the core of his being. Observing such a crossing teaches us more about a man than years of conversations, casual interactions, or even shared experiences. It tells us how he perceives right and wrong, what he values above comfort or approval, and how deeply he is willing to stand for truth. It is fascinating how crossing this line can occur in everyday life, not just in grand, dramatic gestures. It can be seen when he chooses honesty over deceit, in a situation that could have benefited him to lie, when he prioritizes fairness over advantage, when he supports those who cannot support him in return, and when he resists the temptation to conform to societal pressures that conflict with his conscience. Every act, every decision at this threshold becomes a testament to his inner moral compass, a silent proclamation that defines the measure of his character far beyond what words could ever convey. It is this consistency in crossing the line of integrity, the unwavering adherence to what he knows to be right despite challenges, temptations, and the ease of compromise, that builds a reputation that endures, a legacy that is respected, and a life that is aligned with purpose. People often look for heroes in extraordinary circumstances, but the true heroism of a man lies in the daily choices where his integrity is tested, in the quiet moments where no one is applauding, and in the decisive instant when he steps over the line, not out of rebellion, fear, or impulse, but out of an unwavering commitment to what he believes is morally, ethically, and spiritually correct. It is these moments that define a man more profoundly than any success, any accolade, or any public recognition, because crossing this line is an intimate reflection of his soul, a window into the principles that shape every thought, decision, and action he takes. Every man faces moments in life that are irreversible, moments where a decision is made and the path behind him ceases to exist, leaving only the road ahead. This is the essence of the point of no return, a threshold that once crossed transforms circumstances, relationships, and even the man himself. It is not always a grand, dramatic moment, but often a subtle shift, a quiet decision that carries monumental weight. Crossing this line signals that there is no turning back, that choices now carry consequences that must be faced with courage, responsibility, and clarity of purpose. It is in these moments that the true measure of a man emerges, not in comfort or convenience, but in the strength to accept accountability and the willingness to move forward despite uncertainty. The point of no return is a natural test of resolve, a confrontation with fear, hesitation, and doubt. Every man knows deep within that once this boundary is crossed, life as he has known it changes forever. And yet, there is an exhilaration in stepping beyond it because it is a declaration of commitment, a proclamation that he is willing to act decisively and embrace the consequences that follow. Many men spend years hesitating, weighing pros and cons, calculating risks, and imagining what could go wrong. But when a man crosses this line, it is a revelation that he has chosen action over indecision, conviction over uncertainty, and progress over stagnation. This threshold is not only about personal decisions, it affects everyone around him. When a man commits to a direction, it often sets off a chain reaction, inspiring others to act, respect, or recalibrate their own positions. It sends a message that words alone are no longer enough, that thought has transformed into action, and that a new chapter has begun, one that cannot be rewritten or erased. There is a power in this moment that is unlike any other, a silent intensity that resonates with inner strength, resolve, and the courage to face the unknown. The point of no return tests not just courage, but clarity of vision. A man must know what he values most, what he is willing to risk, and what he refuses to compromise on, because once the line is crossed, retreat is no longer an option. It is an ultimate demonstration of priorities, an exposure of what truly matters, and a reflection of character under pressure. This moment can occur in countless ways: a business decision that alters the trajectory of a career, a personal choice that defines the course of a relationship, a moral stand that challenges conformity, or a commitment to a dream that requires leaving comfort behind. The point of no return is not always comfortable, and it is rarely easy. It demands faith in oneself, in the principles one stands for, and in the consequences of action. It forces a man to confront vulnerability, to embrace uncertainty, and to trust in the strength of his own convictions. Those who hesitate too long, who allow fear to dominate judgment, often remain stuck in cycles of indecision, unable to step into their true potential. But those who cross this line do so with awareness, purpose, and an unshakable belief in the necessity of their action. There is a profound transformation that occurs at this threshold. A man who steps beyond the point of no return is no longer the same person who once stood on the edge, contemplating possibility. He has evolved because action has a way of solidifying vision, because courage strengthens with execution, and because commitment births resilience. Crossing this line is both an ending and a beginning. It is the closing of a chapter where hesitation ruled, and the opening of a chapter where intention, accountability, and purpose guide every subsequent step. Every decision that carries the weight of no return reshapes priorities, redefines identity, and clarifies purpose. It is a moment that demands awareness, reflection, and the absolute courage to accept the consequences of moving forward, because retreat is no longer a choice and compromise is no longer sufficient. It is in these decisive actions, these points of no return, that the depth of a man's integrity, strength, and vision are truly revealed, and the trajectory of his life is forever altered in ways that cannot be reversed. Every man possesses boundaries, invisible yet powerful lines that define his sense of self, his limits, and the respect he expects from the world around him. These boundaries are not arbitrary. They are cultivated over time through experiences, disappointments, victories, and lessons learned from life's complexities. When a man establishes a boundary, it reflects his understanding of what he values, what he refuses to tolerate, and the space he needs to maintain integrity, dignity, and authenticity. Crossing these boundaries is never just a casual act. It is a deliberate intrusion into the sacred arena of his principles and personal convictions. Respect is not demanded, it is earned and preserved, and when a line is crossed, it tests the depth of that respect and the strength of the relationship, whether personal, professional, or societal. Understanding and honoring a man's boundaries requires keen observation and empathy, because these lines often communicate more than words ever could. They represent the standards he lives by, the commitments he has made to himself and others, and the values he refuses to compromise, even under pressure or temptation. When a man reaches the point of asserting his boundaries, it is a clear signal that he has weighed the situation carefully, considered the consequences, and decided that his integrity, dignity, and well-being must take precedence over appeasing others or yielding to convenience. It is not about confrontation, ego, or control. It is about self-respect and clarity in relationships. A boundary crossed is a test, a revelation of how much another person truly understands, values, and respects him. Observing how he reacts when these boundaries are challenged exposes his character, his patience, his resilience, and sometimes the limits of his tolerance. There is an almost sacred quality to boundaries, for they protect the essence of a man's identity, his emotional space, and his mental focus. When ignored or disrespected, it can provoke a response that is both protective and clarifying, a signal to the world that certain lines must not be crossed lightly. The respect of a man is intricately tied to the understanding of these boundaries. Those who honor them receive not only his trust, but his loyalty, cooperation, and genuine connection. Those who disregard them may experience resistance, distancing, or even the firm severing of ties, because crossing a boundary without understanding its significance undermines the foundation of mutual respect. Boundaries also function as a form of communication, silently conveying priorities, limitations, and expectations without the need for elaborate explanations. When clearly defined, they allow others to interact with a man in ways that are productive, meaningful, and harmonious. When crossed, they reveal the depth of disregard or ignorance in others and clarify what actions, behaviors, or attitudes cannot coexist with his principles. Every man's boundary is personal and unique. It is shaped by his experiences, values, culture, and moral compass. Some boundaries are flexible, adaptable with understanding and dialogue, while others are absolute, immovable, and non-negotiable because they are rooted in the essence of his character. Crossing these lines, therefore, is never a trivial matter, and recognizing them requires emotional intelligence, patience, and discernment. In life, there are countless moments when boundaries are tested through pressure from others, conflicting interests, moral dilemmas, or even subtle provocations. But the way a man navigates these moments defines his strength, integrity, and maturity. Respecting a boundary does not simply mean avoiding conflict. It signifies acknowledgement of the man's identity, his self-worth, and his expectations. It is a sign of empathy, understanding, and emotional alignment. A man's response to the crossing of his boundaries can range from quiet firmness to deliberate action, but in all cases, it is an affirmation of his values and a declaration of self-respect. Observing these dynamics offers profound insight into human interaction, leadership, and personal growth, because boundaries serve as a compass for behavior, decision-making, and interpersonal relationships. The balance of respecting boundaries while asserting them requires wisdom, courage, and self-awareness, for boundaries are not barriers of isolation, but structures that enable trust, honor, and meaningful connection to flourish. The moment when a boundary is crossed carries immense weight because it tests the limits of respect, integrity, and patience, and it forces a man to either reinforce his standards, negotiate with clarity, or remove himself from situations that compromise his principles. Through these interactions, the invisible lines that define a man's world become clear, and the lessons they impart about respect, accountability, and authenticity resonate far beyond the immediate circumstances, shaping the very way he engages with life and the people he allows close to him. Words have power, but they are fleeting, fragile, and easily forgotten. They can inspire, persuade, and create visions of possibility, yet without action, they remain nothing more than sound and ink floating in the air with no tangible weight or consequence. A man's true measure is not in what he says, not in the promises he makes or the dreams he shares, but in the decisions he executes, the steps he takes, and the realities he manifests through deliberate effort. When a man crosses a line, when he moves beyond talk into action, it becomes a profound statement, one that reveals the depth of his commitment, the strength of his character, and the seriousness of his intentions. There is a difference between speaking of change and creating change, between expressing ambition and realizing it, between offering support and standing as a pillar of support when the world tests resolve. Action is the ultimate language of authenticity, a language that requires courage, discipline, and faith in oneself. It is easy to make promises, to declare intentions, to describe dreams, but to act, to push beyond fear, inertia, and doubt demands a level of inner fortitude that not everyone possesses. A man who chooses action over words demonstrates clarity of purpose and decisiveness. He is not swayed by hesitation, not paralyzed by what-ifs, and not limited by the opinions of those who do not understand his vision. Each step he takes across the line is an affirmation of his values, a declaration that he is willing to do what others only talk about, and a signal that he is prepared to bear the consequences of commitment, responsibility, and results. Actions have a ripple effect that words cannot replicate. They inspire others, shift dynamics, and create momentum that transform situations and relationships. While words can be interpreted, misunderstood, or dismissed, actions leave an indelible mark. They are proof that intention has been converted into reality. Crossing the line with action rather than rhetoric reveals priorities and exposes authenticity, because it demonstrates that a man's principles are not theoretical but operational. He does not merely discuss integrity, courage, or perseverance. He embodies them through tangible choices and behaviors. Every decision to act, every deliberate movement across a boundary or line communicates volumes to those watching and those affected. Observing a man in action tells you more about his character than any number of conversations could. It demonstrates his commitment to values over convenience, persistence over procrastination, and influence over idle speech. Action validates intention. Without it, even the noblest words risk being dismissed as empty or insincere. The world measures impact through results, progress, and consistency, and these are produced only when thoughts and words are translated into purposeful deeds. When a man crosses this critical line and chooses to act, he also inspires accountability both in himself and in others. He sets a precedent, a standard, and a visible example of what is possible when courage meets initiative. Action requires overcoming fear, resisting complacency, and embracing discomfort because the process of transformation is rarely comfortable and the pursuit of meaningful objectives demands more than mere rhetoric. Each act taken in alignment with principle strengthens confidence, builds credibility, and solidifies the man's position in the eyes of himself and the world. The difference between talk and action is the difference between illusion and reality, between aspiration and achievement, between theory and proof. Words can outline a dream, but action constructs it. Words can express intention, but action manifests it. Words can inspire, but action demonstrates the truth of that inspiration. A man's crossing of a line, therefore, becomes more than a physical or situational act. It is a declaration that he embodies accountability, that he prioritizes doing over promising, and that he understands the profound impact of translating thought into movement. Action carries authority, influence, and permanence. It is the currency of respect and the measure of legacy. And when a man acts decisively, he signals to the world that he is serious, committed, and unshakable in his principles. Each movement, each choice, each intentional step across the line embodies courage, persistence, and the willingness to transform vision into tangible reality, showing that the power of action far exceeds the power of words, and that true respect, influence, and change are born not from what is spoken, but from what is done. When a man crosses a line, it is rarely just a physical or situational act. It is a profound expression of his internal world, a manifestation of emotions and psychological truths that words often fail to capture. Every decision, every boundary crossed, and every decisive step is fueled not merely by logic, but by the complex interplay of feelings, thoughts, experiences, and convictions that reside deep within him. Emotions are the driving force behind action, guiding perception, shaping judgment, and influencing behavior in ways that may be subtle or unmistakably clear. When a man reaches the point of crossing a line, the intensity, clarity, and nature of his emotions reveal the depth of his investment, the seriousness of his intentions, and the strength of his psychological framework. It is a moment when the mind and heart converge, where passion, resolve, fear, courage, and conviction come together to create an undeniable signal that resonates beyond the immediate action. Observing these signals provides profound insight into a man's priorities, motivations, and the principles that govern his life. He may cross a line out of love, driven by a desire to protect, support, or defend what matters most to him, and in that act, the emotion of care, commitment, and responsibility becomes visible. Alternatively, he may cross a line out of anger, frustration, or a refusal to accept injustice, revealing a psychological threshold where patience has ended, where tolerance has limits, and where a profound need for respect and fairness surfaces with intensity. Every emotional cue accompanying this action, tone, posture, focus, and decisiveness speaks volumes about his inner state, his mental resilience, and his readiness to confront challenges. Psychological signals are equally telling. They reflect his clarity of thought, his ability to process consequences, and the confidence he has in navigating the outcome. A man who crosses a line decisively demonstrates cognitive alignment with his principles, a mental preparedness that allows him to take responsibility without hesitation, and an awareness of the ripple effects of his actions. It is in these psychological patterns that strength, foresight, and emotional intelligence are displayed. Those who fail to understand this often misinterpret behavior as rashness, aggression, or impulsiveness, when in reality it is a careful orchestration of emotional courage and mental clarity coming to the surface. The combination of emotion and psychology at the moment of crossing a line is what differentiates mere action from meaningful, transformative action. It is what transforms a simple boundary crossing into a statement of identity, purpose, and intent. Each gesture, decision, and expression carries encoded information about values, priorities, and internal conflicts, and decoding these signals provides a window into the very essence of a man's character. Emotional and psychological signals are also inherently instructive for those around him, for they communicate boundaries, expectations, and the depth of commitment without the need for extensive explanation. They act as a form of nonverbal clarity, making the stakes, the seriousness, and the intention unmistakably clear. The emotions that fuel these moments, Whether determination, love, anger, or steadfastness combine with cognitive processing to ensure that crossing a line is purposeful, deliberate, and aligned with principles. A man's ability to recognize his emotions, harness them, and translate them into decisive action is a hallmark of emotional intelligence, resilience, and maturity. It demonstrates that he is in touch with his inner world, aware of his motivations, and capable of channeling psychological insight into behavior that not only respects his own boundaries but also conveys meaning to others. These signals, when observed carefully, reveal patterns of thought and feeling that define a man's identity. They are the markers of integrity, clarity, and authenticity. They indicate whether his actions are impulsive reactions or intentional manifestations of principle. They allow others to understand not just what is being done, but why it is being done, and the emotional and cognitive forces that drive him. In essence, crossing a line is never a purely external act. It is a full-bodied expression of internal truth, a convergence of emotional intensity and psychological acuity that communicates far more than words ever could, revealing depth, conviction, and a profound alignment between thought, feeling, and action. When a man crosses a line, it often becomes far more than a personal act. It transforms into a catalyst for change that reverberates through his life and the lives of those around him. This act signals the ignition of momentum, the shift from inertia to decisive movement, and the awakening of transformation that can alter circumstances, relationships, and even the trajectory of his destiny. Crossing a line is rarely neutral. It carries energy, intention, and consequence, and it initiates a series of events that can create profound change in ways that are both immediate and long-lasting. Every decision that moves a man beyond a boundary, beyond hesitation, or beyond doubt is a spark, a deliberate act of progression that challenges the status quo, redefines expectations, and signals that the era of indecision or stagnation has ended. It is in this crossing that change begins, not as a gradual or passive phenomenon, but as a deliberate, intentional disruption of patterns, routines, and limitations that may have constrained growth, potential, or purpose. Change begins within, as the act of crossing a line shifts mindset, perspective, and self-perception. The man who steps over the threshold is no longer confined by fear, doubt, or indecision. He has affirmed his agency, embraced responsibility, and claimed ownership of the direction of his life. This internal transformation naturally extends outward, influencing the environment, relationships, and opportunities that surround him. When a man acts decisively, he communicates to the world that he is ready for evolution, prepared for challenges, and willing to confront obstacles with courage and determination. His action becomes a ripple that motivates, inspires, and sometimes even challenges others to reassess their own positions, boundaries, and choices. Every act that crosses a line has the potential to catalyze progress, whether it is a commitment to a personal goal, a moral stand, a transformative decision in a career, or a deepened investment in a relationship. The significance lies not just in the act itself, but in the energy it releases, the awareness it creates, and the momentum it generates. Change is often resisted because it requires movement away from comfort, familiarity, and predictability. But when a man crosses a line, he demonstrates that he is willing to embrace discomfort for the sake of growth. And in doing so, he invites transformation into every aspect of his life. This catalytic effect is amplified by clarity of purpose, intentionality, and emotional alignment. When actions are rooted in principle and guided by conviction, they produce outcomes that extend beyond immediate circumstances and resonate on deeper levels. People are drawn to those who act decisively, who step beyond hesitation, and who model the courage to initiate change. And in witnessing this, they are often inspired to examine their own boundaries, priorities, and potential. The act of crossing a line is thus not merely a personal milestone. It is a communicative force that signals readiness, authority, and transformation. It reminds the man himself that he possesses the power to influence outcomes, shape environments, and redefine what is possible, while also signaling to others that meaningful progress requires courage, commitment, and a willingness to act decisively. A single step beyond hesitation can set off a cascade of opportunities, solutions, and revelations that might have remained hidden if indecision or fear had prevailed. It is often in these moments that breakthroughs occur, perspectives shift, and pathways that were once obscured become clear. The catalytic nature of crossing a line is magnified by the awareness that life does not wait for permission, and that significant transformation often requires boldness, intentionality, and timing. Each action taken beyond a line of limitation, hesitation, or uncertainty has the power to create a new normal, to rewrite patterns, and to establish momentum that propels both the man and those around him forward. Through this lens, every boundary crossed, every decisive step taken, and every commitment acted upon becomes more than a personal victory. It becomes an agent of change, an instigator of growth, and a beacon demonstrating that meaningful progress arises when intention meets action, courage confronts fear, and decisiveness overcomes hesitation.